And so this is SIG-Apps for August 31st. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. The agenda and where we can collaboratively take notes, I just pasted into chat. We can scroll down to the 31st, which is this week's. And it looks like Michal, who is not here today, has set up a couple of demos for us. And so we've got a couple of demos. We want to keep the demos not too long today because we're also going to talk about 1.5, and Brian Grant has asked us to consider moving the date so he can start to attend sometimes, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. So not to take too much more time, Sebastien, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Can you hear me?
I can. The floor is yours.
Okay, hold on. Stop video. I need to mute one. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm gonna try something. I'm gonna try to share my iPad with Zoom. So I can share or something.
I'm not seeing anything. Are you sharing right now?
Okay, not working. So let's do share screen from here. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yep.
Join audio. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So sorry about that. I was trying to share through my iPad, but it looks like it's not working. So are you seeing my screen now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Matt. Okay, so Michel asked me to do a quick demo of Cabin, which is the first Kubernetes iPhone application. You can get it on the App Store right now. Search for Kubernetes, and the app is free, and you can, of course, download it. So here I'm running the simulator. We're gonna see if this works, because sometimes the simulator is a little bit buggy. So basically, Cabin, we started with this because we wanted to manage our Kubernetes application easily, kind of like kube control, but a little bit faster with simple touch actions. So when you install Cabin, you can define clusters. So here you get cluster, you define an endpoint, you can give it a name. Authentication is username and password or a token. And then you add clusters. So here you should see 3 clusters. One is my test cluster. One here is the exascale cluster. It's one of my test bed. And I studied one on GKE. So you got here a GKE endpoint. So you can add clusters. You got a nice swipe left action. So if you want to edit the endpoint and credential of an existing cluster, of course you can get back to it. And if you want to delete a cluster, of course you can delete the cluster. So once you get the clusters, you get this view, which we think is pretty exciting. Of course, you get your pods, you get your services, your nodes, deployments. But what we did, obviously, because there are lots of resources in Kubernetes, we wanted to make this configurable. So in the settings, you can go here and you can turn on and off or hide basically resources. So here I'm just going to hide the nodes. So if you get back to your cluster view, suddenly you just see pods, services, and deployments. Okay, so that's kind of exciting already. If you see a pod, you click on it, and you get some information about the pod. We didn't put everything in there because the YAML is quite heavy, but you see an eye icon here at the top. So if you click on the eye icon, you actually get the complete YAML. Okay, but you cannot edit the YAML at that point right here. Okay, interesting things that you can do is that you can get to the logs. So here I'm getting to the logs of the container, and ping me if you're not seeing this, okay? Because I'm not getting much feedback. But obviously that pod has multiple containers. So if you click on the top here, container, you can switch to the different container in that pod, and you get the logs in that other container. Okay, so I think we're quite happy with this. Of course, you have the exec command. So type ls, for example, execute. You get it. We're not expecting admins to do this for real work, but we think that when you're on the go and you have an alert, something is not running. If you want to do a quick check into a container, we think it's quite handy. Of course, you can also add labels. So here, if I add a new label, SIG-Apps, here I just added the SIG-Apps label. You see it. You click on the arrow, and there you go. It should delete the label. Okay, so logs, exec, and labels are kind of nice. Here you have a search window. So here you can see everything. Obviously, if I search for SIG, I'm not seeing anything. It's searching by label. If I go back to this guy and I add a new label, with the simulator, I'm not seeing what I'm typing. So if I add the SIG-Apps label, and I go back to my search query, and now I look for SIG, only that pod shows up. So okay, that's the simulator acting up. So that's pod. That's kind of nice. For deployments, what we wanted to do is the easy kubectl run command. So we don't want to make it too complicated. So here you can deploy. I like that container. You can deploy. You just specify an image, and we totally understand there are way more parameters that define a deployment. But here for demos, it's kind of nice. So now you have a game deployment, and again a few parameters that you get, and you can also get the full YAML. So the pods swipe down will refresh. So we'll see our game pod coming up, and it created a service. Actually, that shouldn't have been there. That was before. So let's expose this. So you create a new service. You can specify deployment here. I only have one deployment, so it picked it up. I define a port. Let's say it's port 80, and I've created a new game service. Okay. The game service is very handy with kubectl. What I end up doing a lot of the time to debug things is switch the service type. So by default, of course, you get a cluster IP type service. We check the YAML, we see it's a cluster IP. I'm going fast a little bit. I hope you find it interesting. I'm seeing messages, but I cannot check. So what I do with kubectl a lot is switch the type with kubectl edit. So what we wanted to do is just a simple tap. And here, bang, we just switched to node port. So here, if you look at your port definition, now it took your 31664 port. And if we look at the detail view, now we have a node port, great. So single tap, we switch the cluster type, service type. I think it's very exciting. And here you click on the port definition, open in a browser, and it opens a browser on your device. Obviously, I opened the firewall to get to that node port. It wouldn't work like that, in regular cluster. But How do I play this on the simulator? Yeah, and now I can just run 2048 on Kubernetes deployed through my mobile application in like 1 minute. Load balancer works on GKE, so you can switch to load balancer type. That's kind of exciting. Of course, deployments, you can scale. 16, maybe a bit too much. So you just move the slider and we should see pods coming up. We still need to work a little bit on the refresh here. We're not using WebSockets yet. So it's a pool. So swipe down, you refresh, and you see all your new game pods coming up. And of course, deployment starts replication controllers. So if you want to see your replication controllers, you turn them on. I'm not going too fast. And now I see my replica set, which we didn't really work on commands there. One last exciting thing, I think, is background noise here. No big deal. The nodes, you get your nodes. You can delete them, of course. And let's take this one. And here, we just put a little tab. Now, I don't want you to schedule pods on this one. So unschedule. And now your node is just unschedulable. Get back to it and poof, make it schedulable again. Here, you got like those 3 dots. Click on that, put the node in maintenance, which will mark it unschedulable and then drain the nodes. So quite exciting. Going fast a little bit here, but that's almost it. The last thing here is that interesting tab here, deploy. Click on deploy, and here what do we see? We actually see a Helm charts store. So this is the Kubernetes charts testing store. So we actually grab the index YAML from the store, and then we render this quite nice view. We have some default icons based on the name and the tags of the charts. So that's exciting. You scroll down and you see everything you have in the store. This is just a preview. When you install Cabin, this is not going to work. But we wanted to give you this preview because that's where we're going. We really want to do a single touch application deployment. What it will do right now is that, let's say you want to do deploy on cloud. It will say, okay, where do you want to deploy on cloud? You got 3 clusters in your setup. So I want to deploy it in this cluster. And it gives you this message, which is, hey, I'm not finding a Tiller server. Tiller being the server part of Helm. We didn't find Tiller deployment. Do you want that we create it for you? Yes, everything is set up. There's a tiny bug here on the simulator. It's fixed now. And that's it. Okay, that's the preview. It just deployed Tiller. It's not going to deploy the charts. We know it's not a bug. If we go back here, we see a Tiller deployed. Let me scale my game. No, maybe not 0. Maybe 2. So now we have some screen. We see a Tiller deployment. Let's go back to the pods. The game pods are going to clear. We should see a Tiller pod at some point appear if things didn't fail. Where is my Tiller pod? We created Tiller service. So the Tiller service is there. And where's my Tiller pod? It's not showing up. Here you go. Taking a little bit of time to refresh. We need to fix that with WebSockets. It's a React Native app, so we'll get the WebSocket going. And I'm on the Tiller pod. I get the logs. Tiller is running. What we did right now is that the service is a node port service, and then set up your Helm client to talk to that node port service on your Kubernetes endpoint, and you get a working Helm install that you deploy that touch. So what you can expect, we're going to keep adding some very interesting features that we have in store. Cluster provisioning probably through GKE, because GKE has an Objective-C library Woohoo! That would be interesting. And of course, fix the chart deployment. Helm is still heavily being developed, so we're gonna need to introspect the charts, the values that YAML, being able to give you, you know, like a form to fill out the values if you want to change them, and then actually deploy. There's a technical reason why this is not working yet, just to do with gRPC and the port forward call. But we have it in development, it's working, okay? The app is not open source. I'm sorry, guys, we do a lot of open source stuff. You can check our GitHub. But this one is not open source because we're gonna try to monetize it and make a living with this. So thanks a lot. And if you have any questions, I'll check the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? And to reiterate, this SIG is recorded and the video will be put online sometime later today. It takes a little while to export it and get it converted and all those things. But it'll be online later today, just like all our videos are if you go back through the meeting minutes. But are there any questions? No, okay, great demo. Thank you very much. This looks really cool. I saw a lot of great traffic and people are really excited about this on Twitter. And so I look at it, this is great. So we have a second demo today from Michael from Red Hat. Are you on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
but I need a visual confirmation.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Or something was going. Yep. Okay, perfect. Let me show my screen. And can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to demo is not that fancy, that's Sebastian's demo, but it's something that we were talking about the last SIG meeting where we were deploying apps. And, you know, during the deployments, we touched the topic of how to roll back a database if deployment fails and various scenarios like that. So what I'm going to demo is something we have in OpenShift deployment config, which is deployment hooks. So it's basically we have three kinds of hooks in OpenShift. So first one is a pre-deployment, then we have a mid-deployment and post-deployment hook. The pre-deployment is executed before deployment starts or before the rollout. The mid-deployment hook is executed in the middle of deployment, and post-deployment is executed after, right? So there are many use cases for using the hooks. For example, migrating the database, tagging the images after a successful deployment, triggering another deployment so you can build a chain, waiting for services to come up, and other use cases. So what I'm going to demo today is like how you can set the deployment hooks to existing deployment. So this is my OpenShift console running on my developer box, and I have OpenShift running here. And I have the deployment config called demo app. So first, let me try to set a hook. So with this command, I will update the deployment config called demo app. I will set the mid hook, and that mid hook. Can you see this stuff as well? Mm-hmm. I don't know how to disable that. Okay, and this mid hook will basically start the container using the image I have in deployment, and it will execute this command inside that container. So the hook is set now, and I'm going to start a new deployment. So with this command, I will trigger a new deployment for a demo app. I will use the latest, and the follow will mean that it will follow the logs. So comparing to the Kubernetes deployments in OpenShift, the deployment rollout is managed by deployer pod. So we have a pod that basically scaling down and scaling up the replication controllers, and the follow will just stream the logs from this container. So started a new deployment, and now the mid hook is running. Yeah, my DB is migrated and success, and the deployment continues. What is important here is that let me edit demo app. So this is how the mid-hook is defined. What is important here is the failure policy. So that means if this command will fail, the entire deployment will fail. But in this case, it's set to ignore. So if this command will fail, deployment just continues just fine. And yeah, I think that's it. Do we have anything else? But do you have any questions?
Thanks for the demo. Yeah, anybody have questions? Okay, we'll take silence as no questions. If anybody has questions, please feel free to put them into the chat or to bring them into Slack or to start a conversation on the mailing list, and we can continue conversations about both these great demos today. Thank you. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about is something that I noticed is not on the agenda. Earlier this week, or I should say actually the end of last week, Brian Grant asked about moving the meeting date to see whether there would be a date where, basically a date and time where he could attend. And his suggestion was Mondays, maybe in a similar time slot to what we have now. And so I was wondering if anybody had objections to moving the date. I hear silence, which means I think, does it sound like everybody would be able to attend Mondays? All right. So what I'm going to do is I created, where did it go? A doodle to try to grab possible times. And I see somebody already said they have trouble with the 12 p.m. Eastern time zone slot. I tried to create a doodle, which I think is times when Brian can make it that day. So here it is. If everybody here could drop in, and again, I'll send this out to the mailing list and drop it in chat. If you could let us know what times work, because we have a little bit of wiggle room in here, and maybe we can pick a time that works for more people than other times do, so we can try to be as inclusive as possible.
Would we consider lengthening the meeting so that we can both have, we can fit, multiple demos and technical discussion into one meeting? That also might give the ability for people, if it spans like, 11:30 to 12:30 or something, whatever, people that have an hour-based conflict might still be able to get there for half of it.
We might, if we do that, we might want to go to one every 2 weeks, like a lot of the other SIGs. I don't know, that might make it easier for people to deal with a longer meeting.
So what do folks think about this? Anybody else want to speak up?
I like the idea of having a longer meeting. We've had a lot of discussion and we've been going over for most of the meetings. So it seems like we need more time anyway. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I like the idea too. We've had trouble keeping within a half an hour, a little bit more long-winded than we thought we'd originally be. We have a lot of good content, more demos, and we want to get into some of the more technical topics, which we've been putting at the end, which feel kind of time crunched. So I like the idea of, if we're going to switch the time, maybe expanding it to an hour as well.
So what do we think about the every 2 weeks instead of every week? I personally think we could leave it for weekly for now. I know there are so many items to talk about, and then maybe if that seems like a little bit much, we could also talk about changing it to every other week.
Let's start with weekly. I feel like if we're time crunched, we don't want to reduce the total amount of time we have.
Yeah. So we'll do weekly, and we'll try to expand it to an hour. And if you could fill in the doodle time ranges that work for you, please choose more than one. I know the European folks are probably thinking, I'm just going to choose the earliest time slots because of that. But then we might have trouble. We'll probably fit some time that's later in the day for Europe and earlier in the day for Pacific time zone, so we can be as inclusive as possible. But yeah, the more you could fill in, the more I'd appreciate it. I'm really looking to see whether a lot of people have a particular time conflict, that kind of thing. So thank you with that. stay tuned to the list and stuff like that. We probably won't change for next week. It would be the following week would be the first week with a change. Next week, Monday, for anybody who's in the US, it is a holiday, and so we can keep the same Wednesday meeting for that, and then announce the time slot there and all of those details. And then the following week is when we would switch. Okay, the next thing, Matt Butcher, are you on?
I am.
Can you give us a quick update on what's happened in the last week in Helm?
Yeah, sure. So the Helm project released Alpha 3 not too long ago, and we've been plowing ahead on the Alpha 4 roadmap. In the last weekend, last 8 work days or so, we've finished up with our binary release process. We kind of prototype tested that on Alpha 3, but now we've gotten it kind of cleaned up. We've merged the provenance file stuff, which means we now have cryptographic integrity checks and things like that. Helm status got a big overhaul and is now far more useful. Ville from Google has spent a lot of time working on that, and it's really coming together well. And we also added automatic API checking. So now when you install a Helm manifest, prior to the actual installation being run, Tiller will verify that you're not requesting any kinds or any versions that are not currently supported by the server. So that all happens automatically with nobody having to edit files and explicitly say which versions of what APIs are working. So we're really happy with those 4. Those are 4 of the 6 features we were shooting for Alpha 4. Also, we had a fairly major bug this week, which was that Helm list wasn't working the way it was supposed to from the Alpha 3 release. And so we scrambled to kind of get that fixed up. And once we got it fixed, we've been talking about whether or not we ought to just say that was a major bug fix and we have 4 major features. Maybe we'll defer the last 2 features on Alpha 4 for the Alpha 5 release and cut a release early this week. So tomorrow on the developer call, we're going to try and make a go, no-go call on whether or not to release Alpha 4 this week. So it's been a busy week, pretty exciting week, a little bit embarrassing when you ship and then find a bug right after, but that's the way Alpha releases go sometime. So if you have strong opinions or you just want to be a fly on the wall, tomorrow at about this time, we'll have the public development meeting for Helm, and you can drop in the Kubernetes Helm channel and get the link for that. That's all I got.
Thanks, Matt, for the quick update. All right, the next thing we wanted to talk about is we wanted to look at what goes into Kubernetes 1.5 and how can SIG-Apps get involved in that and help organize some of those things. So with that, I'm going to share in here the list of stuff from 1.5 that we're already discussing. And I want to say it was Clayton. You had something that you wanted to talk about on this, or you're the one who brought it up originally?
Yeah.
So, you or anybody else want to kick this off?
Sure. So generally most of the SIGs try to pull up a list of the things that they're focusing on from a technical perspective, either technical debt, new features, a summary of the things that are important to Kubernetes as a whole. So it's a little bit less about, it's not necessarily all about features, but it is what kind of the SIG focus is going to be and who's going to be working on what and how things are prioritized. Different SIGs do it slightly differently. I think it'd be great for SIG-Apps to start having people, concretely taking and owning topics because it helps things that other SIGs aren't necessarily covering, like pet sets and some of the use case driven stuff. The more we can have this SIG really be thinking about running applications and driving features, the more effective Kubernetes will be as a whole. And so what I tried to do is drop, and this is again just a sketch of everything that I'm kind of aware of that people are working on. And I wanted to get everybody on SIG-Apps who plans on contributing technically to these areas, or to the SIG-Apps area in general, into KubeCore to help draft this list up. I'd like for us to go through and prioritize and review it and commit resources from the various companies and individuals involved to the point where we can roughly say, this is what our SIG is doing for Kube 1.5, and here are the features we're sponsoring. So this is somewhat of a sketch. Eric Toon's on the call. We kind of had one important topic out of this to discuss, which I think it's important for the SIG to kind of start getting familiar with and help drive to conclusion, which is identifying the timing for pet set going into beta. And then I think, in a future meeting, I would really urge everyone to help come to the issue, comment on things. So let's try to brainstorm and build this list out. And then we can, in a future SIG meeting, try to refine it down to, this is what, there's a number of folks from Red Hat on here. This is what Red Hat's going to work on. This is what folks from Google are going to work on. This is what folks from CoreOS or Deis or any of the other, people involved in the SIG who want to push something forward that generally falls on the SIG agenda. So at this point, I'll hand it off to Eric unless there's any questions on kind of the intent of it.
Clayton, I have a question. Would it be all right for anybody who has something to propose or add to this doc to directly add it? Or would you like for them to comment?
Absolutely. It is shared as editor with Kubernetes SIG-Apps. So
Okay.
you can edit. If you're not sure whether you want it or not, definitely do suggest. It just makes it easier to go track the edits. But please add things to the list, and then we should grow it, and then we'll prune it down later.
All right, thank you.
I guess since we're short on time, my first question is, Michelle, is there any way, it looks like the agenda is pretty tight for next week. Is there any way, since 1.5 planning does have a certain cadence to it, for us to bump that up in the agenda?
Yeah, I'll discuss it with the people who are scheduled, and we'll make that the first thing that we talk about next meeting. Does that sound good?
That sounds good.
Okay.
And one thing I just wanted to call out of the whole list is we would like to bring PetSet to beta in 1.5 if we can. We're hoping to see charts that in the incubator that use PetSet and get as much feedback as possible through issues on Kubernetes/Kubernetes, mailing me, Clayton, Slack, in the app mailing list, whatever, feedback on PetSet and what you think is missing so that we can drive that to beta next release. That's all I reply.
To sidebar for a quick moment on pet sets. Do we have if we wanted to say somebody come make something for pet sets, here's a quick how-to guide for you to get started. Do we have that somewhere?
We do on Kubernetes.io. I will chat it to the room.
Yeah, I think Prashanth made everybody else look bad because his docs were about as big as all of the other docs that existed at the time, and they were just for pet sets. So they should be as exhaustive and as extensive of getting someone up to speed and what they need to do as humanly possible.
Perfect. All right. So folks on the call, can everybody take an action to go look at this list before the next meeting to see what things you would either want to be involved in, maybe already are involved in, add things to the list, whatever. And Matt Butcher and whoever's working on Helm, there is a Helm improvements area on this list. If you all could figure out what that might look like and time frames, I imagine that would be good.
Okay.
All right. We're a few minutes over right now. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about with the 1.5 proposed work? Then I will open the floor. Are there any other things we wanted to briefly or quickly touch on before we break for the week? Fantastic. Thanks everyone for coming. Again, the video will be on sometime later today, and it'll go into our meeting minutes with a recording link, and I'll send it out in chat as well. Thanks everyone. Have a wonderful week if I don't talk to you before next week.
Bye. Thank you.
See you guys.